My new thing, it fits in a clock, it wakes in a car, pulls on my brain. Are you ready to see? This is my new thing. Are you ready to see? This thing is my new thing. Shyness will show, excitement will glow. I'm sharing this thing. That thing is my new thing.
Hello, hobbyists, obsessors, weirdos. I didn't mean to call you weirdos. I'm Dan Wilbur.
I'm Zach Sims. Jesus, we never discussed calling them weirdos.
Well, they're all little freaks, and I'm happy to have them. Their new obsession, of course, is this podcast. This is my new thing, where we talk to comedians about their hobbies, their obsessions, past and present. And today, I am excited to welcome Negin Farsad. You might have heard her on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. She has her own podcast called Fake the Nation, and we had a great conversation. But before that, Zach, what are you obsessing over this week?
Oh man, you said that with such a little horny boy tone that I liked. And it actually
I'm horny
fits.
for these opinions.
This guy likes to hear words right in there. It kind of fits, I guess. Obsessed is probably not the right word because I live a life without love, but I did. We talked, I think, on an episode about just getting into the Criterion Collection and movies and stuff like that. And I finally watched a movie that you had recommended to me multiple times, and I've heard other people discuss too. The Korean film Burning is what I watched. Burning. It's 2.5 hours. I'm going to give you that right up top, so you know. So don't load it in yet. Listen to the podcast first or whatever. But and this is not a spoiler, so I don't want to get, it's interesting. A lot of things happen. I don't want to get into details. But one of the things that I found fascinating about it is that in that film, you see a man in his 20s who is not, has some experience in his life, masturbate without the benefit of pornography. And yes. I find that fascinating.
Extremely important. Important now that I've rewatched it, having reread Murakami.
Oh, is it based on a mirror?
Is that how his name is?
I call him Mirror. Well, the ones who know, who've never actually read any of his books.
So Murakami wrote The Elephant Vanishes, which includes a small, 10-page short story about just a guy talking about burning down greenhouses, which is the basis of burning, but you don't know what he's talking about. You don't know what the metaphor is. And when you watch this movie, it's really incredible. But it's also a sort of an amalgam of his other stories and novels, including the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, a lot of which is a guy hanging down at the bottom of a well and just jerking it the whole time.
Really?
I'm sorry. Again, sorry, Mom. That is what the book is about. It is just there's an obsession with masturbation and sex in all of Murakami's work. And I actually think that it is important to the character that he's constantly just using fantasy to get off in that room. He's jerking.
No,
he's literally
sense.
Jerking off to a light at one point, and you're like, I get it. This is interesting.
Well, when you're a writer and you're spending all that time sitting in a room trying to come up with stuff, I'm sure half the time you're like, man, I could just be jerking off right now.
That's what they say about Balzac specifically, which sounds dirty, but that's his name. He's a French writer, that he spent so much time in bed jerking off, and there's all these little portions of his prose that are about sperm, and you go, I see.
Well, you write what you see. You write what you're staring at in that moment. Yeah. Now, was he the guy? Because you recommended a book to me that was about different people's morning routines. I'm somebody who's always struggling for a morning routine. And there was a guy. Daily rituals. And there was a guy who one of his rituals was he would just stand in front of a window and touch himself. Was that Balzac?
I don't remember.
It was one of the guys. That was his thing, which I don't know if you can call that a ritual as much as just an assault that people aren't aware of. But I don't think he was masturbating. I think he would just kind of he was jiggling keys. But it was his
wow, that
his
is
C&Bs.
Incredible stuff. Yeah, that is the depth they go into in that book, Daily Rituals. Great book if you want to know about how Voltaire slept until noon, drank port wine for breakfast, sort of just sat there, bed rotting, took a walk at 4, and then wrote some stuff down, drank some more, and went to bed. And just how good it must have been to be a writer back in the day.
I mean, I'm doing 75% of that on a daily. Yeah, just haven't done the writing. But in some ways, that really leads in, and somewhat nicely, actually, into the conversation we had with Negin.
Absolutely. Let's get to it. I want to just say right off the bat, it's deeply uncomfortable because I am a millennial who owns his house. So just want to start. I just want everyone to, if everyone turned off this podcast right now, immediately. They said, "That's enough. Thank you. That's enough."
You're the problem.
Honestly,
did you also know
kind of true
that millennials are on pace to with home ownership the same way like boomers were?
We're gonna do it.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is in the beginning of millennial aging, like so when they were in their sort of like late 20s or whatever, early 30s. Now they're like legitimately just old people. So like it's fine, but
right.
But millennials in the beginning there was like an article or something that came out that's just like I live with my parents or whatever, and then there was a spate of like millennials live with their parents, whatever, and then we started to stop talking about it. But the story was that they can't afford housing. And then it turned out that they can and they earn good money. And so but the public perception is still that millennials can't buy anything.
Well, because
and I'm
we also
not gonna,
complain about it.
Right. But also it is, to be fair, there's so much to complain about, and it's still really fucking expensive. And I say this as someone who talked about it on my podcast, but I don't have like all the numbers under my fingertips, so whatever. Like, you know, feel free to correct me.
Well, I want to bring this up. Maybe this is a good place to start. Is I was having a conversation with a friend, and he was like, you know, we were the last maybe 3 years of graduating classes.
Yeah.
That got jobs after school, even though the economy had, because I graduated in 2009, and it was 2 years or a year before, depending on how you gauge it, that the economy crashed.
Yeah.
And we were all in trouble. And I just thought that maybe one of the funniest things that's happened in my life was that right at the end of college, like we were getting our diplomas the next day. They took us into the faculty dining room and introduced us to a man we had never seen before, who was just a friend of the college president. And he said, "Here's how the job market looks. Bad." And then they told us that the only way we were going to make money is that there would always be like nursing, you know, maybe not in manufacturing. There'd always be nursing. And there would anyone who was in entertainment was going to be fine. And I was like, "That's right."
What? They said that in 2009?
They said actors.
Oh my
They said
God.
they were like actors, writers, or any creative stuff. You weren't going to make like that much money anyway. But now that there's a recession, maybe you go like write for like a reality TV show or something. Like it was crazy. And then he was like, "But you know, welding is gone. If you studied physics or STEM, I'm sorry we did that to you. Like all the government jobs are gone. They're going to get furloughed." And it was great.
That feels like a very liberal arts college mindset towards. It's just like, well, if you're going to act, you got it made. But if you want to do anything with your hands, you're completely fucked.
I know.
That's right.
This is, by the way, the only time in my entire life that I've heard anyone say this to anyone. Like I
maybe
feel
it wasn't
like
true. It maybe was not true, except my first job was working in a comedy club. And although the comedy club failed, they were correct to be on the trajectory of like comedy's gonna have we were getting into another golden age of comedy. Like it wasn't a dip like the 90s. It was like the 80s in 2010.
Yeah.
To present, really, except that the bubble's about to burst. If we're doing a podcast.
I know. The bubble, I know. It maybe did burst or something. It burst. So I feel like that's what we're living in. You're buying on the dip is what you're doing with this podcast.
That's right.
Oh yeah, 8 years from now. Yeah.
It's going to be a big one. So we're here today to talk about money and your obsession. Let me start, as we always do on this podcast, that you have not been able to hear because it wasn't out by the time we were recording this. Have you had obsessions in the past? Did you have an embarrassing obsession as a child? Are you an obsessive person in general? Have you ever had obsessions before this?
Well, I would, I just was having this conversation with a friend of mine who was in a similar situation, which is that like I was obsessed with U2 as a child.
Wow.
Into my teen years. And the weird thing about that is it's not my age group. So nobody else, like the reason I had that obsession is because my brother is like 13 years older than me, and he would have reasonably, he never got obsessed, but he reasonably enjoyed U2 because they were a big deal when he was a teenager and then whatever. So like that made sense. But I was like, more of a kid and then an adolescent and stuff being like, oh my God, has everyone heard this Joshua Tree album that was not current, And so, but then I became like very obsessed with U2. So, which is funny because then also a lot of kids would have a phase where they were obsessed with their parents' music. So I remember people, saying stuff about the Rolling Stones or whatever. And my parents are immigrants, and so I didn't have any. I was like, have you heard of Iranian pop star Gugoosh? Because that's what we're doing in the Farsad household. So I feel like it's funny when you get your first obsession, it might just be passed on to you sort of accidentally by another generation. In this case, my older brother, much older brother. And so I feel like I went hard on U2, and then I went, and then starting in high school, another, I think, strange one is I went hard on Bjork. And so those are those remain like two of the people like in bands that I just completely will do they're the only famous people that that would make me feel weird and nervous. They're the only, that's it. And they're from like such a young age.
You've never been starstruck?
Well, I was starstruck I met Bono.
My God.
And that was I just didn't know what to say because we were at a conference, and then I sidled up to a bar after the day of conferencing, and it was a TED conference, and I sidled up to a bar, and he was the shoulder that was at my shoulder, just like I didn't realize it was him. And
he had the glasses? No glasses.
He was wearing the glasses.
Oh my God.
He looked like and literally my friends were like trying to like mouth to me from the other side, like, that's Bono. Like I hadn't noticed for a while. And then I finally noticed him, and then I was just like, oh my God. And I just didn't know what to do. Do I stand here forever? Like, does my shoulder just live with his shoulder for the rest of my life? How does this work? Mm-hmm. And then he turns around and he said, because I was still wearing my conference badge like an idiot, even though it was like 11 p.m. And he's like, why are you still wearing your badge? And I was like, and then I just didn't know how to answer him. And then it's funny because I think this probably happens a lot to him. He answered his own question where he was just like, because I see, because I was like I'm a TED fellow. So he was just like, I see, because you worked quite hard to get here and you're quite proud of it or whatever. And I was just like, I don't know, buddy. Yeah, what? I don't know. And then I had the wherewithal to say, he was giving a talk the next day. I was like, how do you feel about your talk? And he's like, I'm quite nervous actually. And I was like, oh, why are you nervous? You performed in front of stadiums. Like, this is ridiculous. And he's like, because it's the smaller rooms that make me more nervous. And then I said, now you'll love this as comedians. I said, I totally get what you mean. Because as a comedian, I would much rather perform in front of a large theater of 1,000 or whatever than a small club of 50 people. And then he goes, you're a comedian, are you? So that means you and I are the same. And I was like, let's stop time, because me and Bono are the same according to Bono. Please let everybody know. And so, so I had this little chat with Bono that made me extremely nervous, sweaty, and starstruck.
This reminded me, Zach, do you have a starstruck story? And then I'll share the opposite of that story.
No, not really. I just know. I mean, who's funnier than Bono? That was my main takeaway. From that guy.
Well, yeah,
comedy.
Zach sees Zach and I both see minor character actors in
Sure.
Park Slope all the time, and we walk.
Yeah.
I mean, we walk past Merritt Weaver once a week.
I've seen
And
Merritt
I
Weaver
say,
10
hello,
to 12
Merritt.
times.
She's a
Nice.
fantastic actress. But if I feel like anyone who heard her name and is driving right now is like, who?
Who? Yeah.
No offense to Merritt. I'm starstruck every time. She's great. She's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you the opposite of this Bono story, which
Yeah.
is that one time Jonathan Safran Foer came into my old bookstore, and I like Jonathan Safran Foer, and we were chatting. I was saying we had all his books, etc. I see him at another event. I'm with another comedian, and he does a whole bit about how comedians at least know what their intention is, which is to make people laugh, usually. I think we all know a couple comedians who are just there for the politics or
Bono.
Bono.
For the applause
So-
breaks or whatever.
For the,
yeah.
the clapter,
The
as
clapter.
they call it in the biz. And so he gives this speech, and then like a week later, he's like, so the problem with writing is that you never actually know what your intention is. Are you trying to inform people? Are you trying to entertain people? Are you trying to make people laugh? Are you trying to make people sad? Are you just trying to get something off your chest? And I was like, man, that's really interesting. And he's like, so it's much worse to be a writer than a comedian, which was funny when he said it. He comes back into the store, and I go, hey, I recap his speech, and I say, that was really good, and you made my friend cry because she realized how tough it is, but she's trying to be a writer, and I was like, I was just so happy to know that being a writer is worse. And Jonathan Safran Foer said, wait a minute, I just want to say, there's nothing worse than being a comedian. And he meant like for your mental health, etc.
Sure.
But it was so funny, and it was the opposite of the Bono story, where he was like,
right.
"Oh man, we are not the same, and I feel so bad for you." Anyway, enjoy your minimum wage job that was consistent.
I
Good
think
job.
he's right. I mean, I don't know, because there's a school of thought that maybe being a musician is worse, but I often feel like if I often feel like, hey, Steven Spielberg, I love your work, but can you do a tight 5? Because that's when I can, that's when I'll really know that you've got it, and that I think is, I agree that there's like something about our job that is so horrendous.
I think I always feel bad for actors because I feel like you have to like get hired. I mean, I guess you can take a class or whatever, but somebody has to allow you to do the thing you want to do, where at least, you can go to an open mic or whatever and,
right.
And
that's
crowd work or something.
arguably what drove me into it, is because I wanted to be an actor, but there was, the gatekeeping and stuff was too much, and I just was like, I can't wait around for this. This is ridiculous, So
One
it
time
kind of drove me into the field.
One time I went to an agent's, I've been to a lot of meetings. I don't mean to brag. I've been to a lot of meetings with agents who then did not sign me. Ooh. And one time I went right around Christmas, and it was like all the actors were like bringing alms. You know what I mean? Like they all had like wine for her, and it's good because I'm so clear that these actors got work from the agent or whatever. And I was like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Like, was I supposed to bring like a bag of my finest coffee from wherever? And I just didn't know. And she had piles of stuff. It was like it looked like someone had made a wish in a story about a genie. It was like Aladdin, just like piles of gold around her. And she was like, "Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's what people do." Anyway,
that is what people do. There's a lot of like sucking butts.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of like, if I had the money to spend on a $300 bottle of wine that I could go give to my agent, would I do that? Would I even remember to do that? Or would I spend the $300
and that's the other
on
thing is
bullshit?
Like, you want it to look expensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't be doing a hand cream basket. You know what I mean? Can't be doing a
You're not doing like a
Bath and Body Works.
Yeah, you're not doing like a Rite Aid purchased assortment of goods.
Kiehl's minimum. Minimum Kiehl's.
What's Kiehl's?
Kiehl's
It's
is,
a
I think,
skincare
high-end.
brand.
Yeah.
Who
Oh,
are
all
you, Dan?
I'm
What do you
sorry,
mean? What is
I'm
Kiehl's?
too rich for Kiehl's. So this is a good way to get into our subject for the day, which is that Negin, you are obsessed with the fads and I guess choices of the rich.
Yeah.
And is that the rich currently or the rich throughout time?
I find the rich. Well, I find that all interesting, and I find that the comparisons throughout time to be interesting because I feel like it's changed. Like it's, I think we have more access to seeing what the wealthy do because of social media. And I think back in the day, like when I was little, I mean, I remember, it was just like 80s movies that showed like mahogany rooms with men like sipping on a snifter of brandy. It was like, I think that's what I associated with wealth. And I don't necessarily think that's wealth anymore. And so, well, I mean, there's pockets of that, I'm sure. But it also feels like, like you would go to a mahogany space to have like an ironic brunch now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I don't know. So I am obsessed with all this stuff, and I'm also obsessed with the feeling of longing everybody has and what they're trying. There's so much. It guides everything, and I don't know that it guided everything when we were little.
Like what hole you're trying to fill, you mean? That's what.
Yeah,
people are obsessed with.
yeah.
Yeah, I just had the thought that. Well, it's gone, so it doesn't matter, Zach.
Well,
Edit that out.
Now, Zach, you have a thought.
No.
that's why I'm here.
I had something
Just for the
so
rare moment.
specific.
When Dan has an aneurysm.
Oh my god.
Well,
I'm
let
so
me ask you.
embarrassed. I had like a really cool
So
thought,
good.
and
It was
it's
so good.
gone. It's gone.
The moment you get back to that thought comes, just interrupt,
I will.
anything
I
and
will.
everything. Whatever. Now, my question, I don't know if this is a question, more of a statement maybe, but when I think of wealth fascination in my childhood, I think of MTV, reality television shows, Laguna Beach,
Yeah.
The Hills. These are the
Yeah.
things
Oh, yeah.
I was watching.
Yeah.
More just because I was a teen and I like seeing teens running around or whatever. But still, the world they're living in, it was very much, I think, right, like leisure based, less than like showing off luxury. It was more just how much fun you were allowed to have because you had no responsibilities, maybe.
And also, I think like Laguna Hills and those things were, The Hills. What was the other one?
Put them together. Laguna Beach.
Laguna
The
Beach.
Hills
that's right.
was a
I like-
spin-off.
I think
believe,
Laguna
yeah.
Hills is maybe the name. Anyway, I don't know. Laguna Beach is the name of the town. So right. So the Hills. Also, I think those people were too young.
Yeah.
To like full or. I don't know, for me to fully sense maybe the extremity of their wealth or something. I don't really know. Like I think also they didn't like have faces that were stuffed with injectables or something.
Sure.
I don't know. Like, so I think there was something about them where
Right.
you didn't necessarily, because they had like the benefit of youth, like they didn't have the signs of wealth that we sometimes see, like I'm thinking now too of the phenomenon of like Mar-a-Lago face, right? Where like you're looking at like a
I'm doing
Christy
it.
Gnome and she's projecting the lips and the thing and the stretchiness or whatever. I don't know what she does. Maybe she just she was, woke up like that or whatever. But but there's these looks, right, that we're seeing that also feel like the cousin of just the Kardashian look that came into play whenever that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's interesting because those are also, they were a sign of wealth, but a different kind of wealth, because a really wealthy person that is, been here for generations doesn't necessarily want it to look like they got anything done. Because a real wealthy person ages like a Meryl Streep ages. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? Which is like, she looks gorgeous. She doesn't look terribly old, but she does not look not her age. She doesn't look like an alien,
Yeah.
So
This is
there's all these things.
this is a hot tip from my dad. Right before he passed away, we went to dinner, like, out in public.
I thought
and
you
he
were saying
saw a
right
table.
before he passed away, we went and got
he passed
Botox
away.
together.
I want to look my best.
Father son Botox.
No,
Yeah.
this was just like sort of out of character for him. So I don't know if there was some drugs involved. And he walked past a table of women who did all look the same. And he's like, that's why you can't all go to the same plastic surgeon, because they all have the same lip filler, the same kind of face. And I was like, man, that is a good tip. Like, you're like, oh, you got to go to this guy. He's the best. And you're like, you can't, if you're best friends with that person, you can't all be looking the same. It ruins the Sex and the City vibe. You got 3 friends and you all look the same. It doesn't work. So you mentioned earlier brandy and a snifter. And this is another thing that I think, along with trying to look natural and not get a bunch of work done, is that people are now obsessed with wellness. And wellness is its own thing. And if you were like an old blue collar guy in the 80s, you're a little fat and you didn't run. You drank beer. You're a regular Homer Simpson and now it's weird. It is weird in America that class, and I think over time everywhere, is the class is represented by like how in shape you are. Like if you're in really good shape and you're not drinking brandy out of a snifter and you're not a literal fat cat. Not a literal one. That would be great if you had a big fat cat who was in charge of something.
Yeah, but also evidenced by the way, the like smoothie making of the White Lotus character.
Yes.
In the most recent season, the son of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm blanking, Patrick Schwarzenegger. Anyways, that character is drinking smoothies that are like protein smoothies for bulking up. So there's like this category of dude that's like the sort of tech bro, finance bro dude who's like really protein obsessed and is trying to keep it chiseled for their desk job. And then there's the sort of generally just wealthy person who's like, I drink a certain number of green juices a day. For the optimal functioning of my organs, represented by like that Brian Johnson guy who, you know who that guy is. He is the guy that like
ageless.
Spends too many. He's trying to back it or age in reverse or whatever. He's trying to be lower than his age. And he's trying to bend button. And and it's funny because he had something done to his face, which I think is just, he's calling it fat scaffolding, which I'm like, is that just injection? Like, is that the same as what these ladies are doing? But anyway, and if you see him, he doesn't go in the sun. He looks very like a vampire because he's very pale, but because he doesn't go in the sun, despite living in California, because he's trying to protect his skin because he's trying to de-age. And he eats between, like, his first meal is at 4:30 in the morning. His last meal is 11:30 a.m. And because that's how much time you need to be intermittent fasting or whatever. Like, and he's like taken to the extreme, a very, very wealthy person whose only obsession is wellness. So think of like an average wealthy person with just like 10% of that, and that's kind of what they're doing.
What's funny about seeing that guy, and if you're listening, you should look up a picture of the before and after, because he does weirdly look older. Like he looks older and younger at the same time. But I've seen pictures of him where he just dresses a little younger, and I go, yeah, you look like
you look younger.
You look good. Like if you just wore a hat and you, I mean, I know his goal is to prove something to people that if we all took statins, our hearts would last forever. But there is something funny that if I just shaved and in fact, like, let myself get a little chubbier and just wore a hoodie around, people would be like, oh, that guy's probably 30.
Yeah, you're right. He's just a coder who's, taking a lunch break or whatever. And he's like, like some kind of kid.
They would assume I have a job if I dress like a younger person. But instead, I'm out here.
It definitely
jogging.
feels like wealth in like the 80s or whatever, or even 60s, was like dying at 55. Was like was like steaks and whiskey for lunch, a few mistresses,
lot of heart attacks.
A lot of heart attacks. You drop it now. It's like, well, I want to be, live on the island after the apocalypse with all the other, one percenters or whatever. So I'm going to soak up every moment and live as healthy and kind of not enjoy life, but I guess probably still enjoying life because you have more money than God. So you're probably doing other cool things.
Well, yeah, and that describes. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Capote or the Swans, whatever it was, like Truman, Truman versus Capote versus the Swans or something, and and Truman Capote had this these ladies that he would hang out with in the 60s and 70s, and particularly in the 70s, so it's just this kind of era where things started to change, and women used to wear gloves, and there's this scene in the show where they go into Bloomingdale's or something, and they want to buy a new pair of gloves, and they've disassembled the glove section because women are no longer wearing gloves. And so they're like, where are the gloves? And they're all speaking in their mid-Atlantic accents. And it's just so interesting because that show is an example, like that era of Truman Capote and these ladies, of drinking yourself silly every day. And that's what you can do with leisure. Your leisure time is not about supporting you in a battle to stay young forever. Your leisure time is about drinking yourself silly and frankly partying. I mean, I gotta be honest, it sounds a little bit more fun than what we're all doing.
Well, I wonder if work was different, because I think there are some middle class people who survived being alcohol, at least from movies.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just something to do in a movie, but there's always a big bottle of soda water so you can mix it with your whiskey. And, sometimes it's just normal people. And I go, oh, is it just life before phones? Like life before you had to communicate via email, you could just be drunk all the time and have meetings where you're a little buzzed, all the way from Mad Men on down. I wonder if work was just different.
You definitely don't have to be rich to drink yourself to death, which is a good lesson for everybody out there. Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
takeaway.
Which is what made income inequality less apparent at that time. Which is that everyone could drink
looked old.
themselves to death, and
Yeah.
they did frequently. Yep. Yeah.
Now, is there a specific, other than being drunk in the 60s and hanging out with Truman Capote, which I think we all think is the dream, is there another type of rich phenomenon that you're obsessed with?
Okay.
What is it?
So this is the other one that I'm obsessed with, which is this idea, I think it's called quiet luxury or whatever, someone on TikTok named it that, which is that you buy a t-shirt that's $400 and wear it, and if you're in the know, you might know that that's a $400 t-shirt, but otherwise you can kind of blend into t-shirts that were $20. And that, I think, is a really interesting phenomenon because it's the subtle signals. Because then I think you wanted everyone to know, a la Trump and his gold trimmings, it was just a bombastic, everyone should know I'm rich. I'm wearing my Chanel suit. I'm wearing, you know what I mean? It was here are the symbols of how wealthy. I'm wearing my very loud watch. It's a $10,000 Rolex or whatever. I don't even know the names of expensive watches. And everything was about showing it. You show it.
Right.
You don't walk around not showing it. Don't pretend like you're not rich. You must show that you are rich. And now it's sort of you're rich, but it's a subtle signifier, and other people who are also rich will recognize that t-shirt.
Interesting.
But if they're not rich, they're just going to think you're wearing a t-shirt. And so I find this really an interesting turn, and I'm curious what you think about this turn in wealth.
Well, I definitely understand it because my wife Anya and I were just talking about it yesterday. Went out, had some lunch, and a waiter kept staring at my watch. And he said, "That is a great watch." And I know that he thinks it's a Rolex, and it's really an Invicta that costs $70. And I only bring it up because it's the inversion where I was I'm embarrassed by the watch now because I don't want to look like a kind of person that has... People have asked me in my bookstore if I'm wearing a Rolex, and I'm context clues. I'm holding a cardboard box. I'm not wearing a Rolex. But when we were discussing it, I did say I have the impulse to, like, because she was like, well, would you ever buy a Rolex? Not on my life. But I would buy a really expensive car that felt nice to drive, but, like,
Tesla.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you want a Tesla.
Yeah, I want a Tesla. Now, currently.
Yeah.
No, I would buy, like, a Lexus is probably the nicest thing you can buy that is a nice car to own.
Acceptable.
That's acceptable to not be, because everybody out here drives like a neon blue Porsche. And I'm like, that's disgusting. That's gross. I don't want to drive a Maserati.
Okay. And the people that are driving the neon blue Porsches, what type of wealth do they have?
Oh,
are
yeah,
they
that's
yacht?
true.
Are they yacht wealth, or
That's
are they
old
kind
yacht
of
wealth.
like?
That's old yacht wealth, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're new money, you have that impulse to just to lie low, to look like you don't, or you think
I don't
it's
know about
not
that.
the case.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zach, what do you think?
I got to meet more rich people.
I just, Young Money, the whole thing is showing it off. I feel like
Oh, that's
that's
true.
like the entire. I always feel like, I don't know if this fully makes sense, but like I've lived in New York and LA, not to brag. I failed on both coasts. And I feel like when you live
Ooh.
I always felt like one of the big differences in New York, let's say you're walking around like Central Park West, you're like, well, I know obviously really rich people live in these buildings and there's clearly really nice homes or whatever in these buildings, but you just see the exterior, where in LA the wealth is on full display
Yeah.
at all times. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
see the houses, you see the cars. That was the only time I ever was like, oh, I get why someone would want to zip around in like $100,000 sports car when you're like driving around the hills in my Kia Forte. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite.
But I also think it depends. There's parts of the country where this is where I think New York City is interesting because, like I live in the East Village of Manhattan, and the East Village is just a strange place.
Not the East Village of Pittsburgh.
Not the East
Yes,
Village of
yes,
Pittsburgh.
I
By
got
the way,
it.
there is
Is there one? I know.
there's an East Village in I want to say Des Moines. And
nice.
and no, this is a super like quick side ridiculous story, which is that Maeve Higgins, friend to one and all,
Yes.
is a comedian, and I was doing an hour at Joe's Pub, and she was opening for at this venue in New York, and she was opening for me like as a favor, and so we're waiting for her to arrive to start the show, and I'm texting her like, "Are you on your way? Like, what's going on?" And she's like, "Oh no, I thought it was tomorrow." And she just messed up. And then I didn't have an opener. I warmed up my own audience, whatever. It was fine. It totally ended up fine. But she felt really bad. And so she ended up buying me this, like a gift certificate to get a massage from the stress she created, which was so, so thoughtful. So she emails me this thing. Here you go. I'm so sorry, whatever. And I was like, oh my God, super not necessary. Don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. And then I open it up. And I was like, oh my God, she got it from, it's an East Village massage, whatever, in Iowa.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I called them up and was like, could you please refund her money and like actually live in the East Village of New York? And they were like, you have no idea how many times this has happened. And I was like, oh my God, other people have made this mistake. Of course. So then Maeve went from feeling bad to then feeling terrible. It was just this whole ridiculous thing. But anyways, I live in the East Village. It is a very strangely mixed income. It's probably one of the only genuinely mixed income neighborhoods
Right.
in the United States of America, because the range is so vast. Because there are there's probably a billionaire that lives here, but
Right.
there's celebrities, there's millionaires, there's people who survive on food stamps. There's people,
Right.
you know what I mean? The range is wild, and then everyone just coexists in this neighborhood, using all the resources or whatever. So then on a regular day, it's not like if you're a wealthy person, you're not shielded from
Right.
people's poverty,
Right.
And I think that changes behaviors, because if you're a wealthy person living in the East Village, you're probably a little ashamed of your wealth or something, or you don't believe, or you're just like, I want to be around normalcy. I want to be around or like there's still starving artists in the East Village or whatever.
Right.
You want to be around that energy. And I think that changes your behavior. If you're like in Bel Air, those places, you don't see people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You get in your car and then you go to another place where you don't see, where you're just around the people you've chosen to see. Like the ability to just like run into people of other socioeconomic rings has like truly diminished in the United States in general. I mean, I think also just in Western democracies in general.
That's nice to hear about the East Village because I associate it with once a year screwing up and going there at night in the spring and just seeing nothing but drunk teenagers. Yeah.
Well, that's the other crazy thing. Yeah. Right. It's like wealthy people, very poor people, and then drunk 20-somethings. On a Friday night. But that's, I mean, that's what, again, it's like, how wild is that, Mm-hmm. Drunk 20-somethings who then walk by a nursing home for old people. Like, it just like doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But and I think it just changes your like how you approach your wealth, your public wealth persona, and I think some people, it's funny because we don't live, in a kind of place. I had to go to South Africa to speak at a United Nations convening in Pretoria. So strange. What did they want from me? It doesn't matter.
They meant to book Bono for that. And then they pointed at you.
But I was in, and one of the things that was really striking about South Africa is that any like minor wealth then requires major security systems on your home. It was everywhere I went. It was like, don't think of looking at this place. We have a security system. There's just so much security in every aspect of life because there's just a lot of robberies. There's a ton of crime. And there's just a ton of petty crime, and so that I don't, I also find that I think maybe we'll go, I don't know what'll happen if income inequality continues, but like, I don't know that wealthy people are like constantly worried about being robbed in the same way.
Right.
I don't know.
It does seem like, I don't know, just in the concepts of like the luxury way it is now, I think maybe people are more aware of the fact that everybody hates the rich and kind of wants them to die. Even like the astronaut thing that just happened, how all these, Katy Perry would not go into space and then come back and realize everyone just wishes them dead. That I feel like maybe there's less of a lifestyles of the rich and famous desire to show off your distinctive mahogany, where it's more like I'm wearing a shirt that other rich people know is very expensive and I'm on a beach that's private, but we're shooting it to make it not seem like it's private. Kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Right. Like, that's my other question, I guess, is like that. It's both aspirational, like everyone wants to be wealthy, but also reviled. So, like, or and I think there's people that can revile and aspire at the same time. I may have achieved that. But I don't know. Where do you guys stand on like where people are? It's like you revile it, but do you secretly also just want it?
Well, I think Zach and I have talked about this, and maybe it's time to talk about Nepo babies and how I'm fine with them. How we're all fine with Nepo babies. Well, because if you sit and you go, well, this person had every advantage, especially in entertainment. You go, this person had absolutely every advantage. They had billions of dollars, not at their disposal, but maybe their parents. And their dad was also, new Geffen or whatever. And now they're a musician, actor, comedian or something. And you go, okay, well, if that's the person, that's the top of the heap. Like, where do you draw the line at, like, this person had a trust fund, this person had no student loans, this person has a car in New York City or something, you know what I mean? Like, that one's a big signifier. Is it like I still have my Camry, my used Camry that was definitely an Uber at first when I bought it used. And I know that because people just jiggle my handle all the time. silver Camry in New York is like really just like the worst car you can have, except that they are reliable and nothing bad has ever happened to it. And it's a good, reliable car, but even having it in New York, like the second I complain about alternate side parking, people are like, "Oh, fancy boy over here."
Right.
So in my head, I think about I think about how there is no line that I could draw in the sand and be like, "You're over there because the B word has come up, billionaire, and I'm over here, just a poor kid whose parents have always supported me in
Wait,
everything
so like
that I've ever done."
so if Merritt Weaver has a child and that child
Merritt Weaver
grows
is a
up-
Nepo baby, I think, right? Or she's like a
Oh,
child
is she
actress.
herself a Nepo
She
baby?
definitely comes from a solid situation. I look up her wiki 2 or 3 times a week, and she definitely.
I shouldn't be talking about her because I genuinely love her. That's what I'm saying. Is
She's
No,
very
I think
talented.
she's a phenomenal actor.
but she
my
started
question is, like,
very
if she-
young. She started very young.
If she had a child, and then that child grows up and becomes an actor, are you annoyed? Is she enough
No.
of a is she enough of a figure? Like, yeah. So Dan's not annoyed. Zach, are you annoyed? And like what? Yeah. Because I mean, I'm like, okay, yeah. So if Robert De Niro's kid grows up, that's obviously like, oh my God, you had every leg up. And then maybe that's annoying. And I mean, I remember having this realization one day because I remember like early on, there was a movie called Moon with Sam Rockwell, and I loved this movie. And I remember looking up just the director and realizing that he's the son of David Bowie. And I was so irritated because I was like, oh, and he's talented, and that's what irritated me. I was
and
getting-
he's making a movie that's just Space Oddity, but a script.
yeah.
I hate it.
Yes,
Anyway.
and I got so angry because I just thought it's not fair to concentrate wealth and talent in one person. You
Right.
know what I mean? It's like you should get one or the other. You shouldn't get both. And the fact is, a lot of these people have both, and it is frustrating because. But the other fact of the matter is like. This city is lousy with talented people. I mean, there's so many talented people that should just be famous because of how talented they are, and they will not be, but when you add a Nepo element,
Yeah.
and you're just upping your chances dramatically.
Well, no one cares
yeah.
when it's a doctor. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
I like the idea of a doctor who came from a doctor, I guess. I have a few thoughts.
They do all the time.
My brother is a doctor who came from a doctor.
Yeah.
All the generations, sure. Well, it's like, generally, you look at Patrick Schwarzenegger, we were talking about earlier, you get these situations, maybe you get one boost, and then you have to earn it, basically. If you suck, you're not going to continue to work. Look at Ed Begley Jr.,
right.
The career he's had after his old man. But I heard Ed Begley Jr. call himself a Nepo baby once, and I thought it was very charming. But you see the same thing. Honestly, you see the same thing in sports, too. There are so many, it's like when your dad was a Major League Baseball player and
Ronnie.
you grow up in a locker room of Major League Baseball players, you're like, oh, I can also be a Major League Baseball player. And then, you have the genes as well as the money that you can work on it all the time. I do feel like, I don't know if this strictly is a Nepo baby thing, but something that can be frustrating is that it used to be the arts were generally for broken people who could not function in any way. And that's all they could do. Even just like Hank Williams drinking himself to death at 27, which how much drinking one would have to do that. Where now everyone is so high functioning. And even people who aren't rich, often, sun salutations or whatever the fuck everybody's doing. So the bar is raised so high that that the wealthy have an additional advantage even into worlds that used to be for people who had, I don't know about no advantage because I guess literature was mostly rich kids anyway. But it just becomes even more difficult for people who don't have that leg up. as you're saying,
Right.
all the talented people in New York who are waiting tables and so on and so forth.
Right.
Because you can't just be a heroin addict and
You can't just be a
do
heroin
music.
addict anymore.
Not anymore.
No.
Yeah,
That's-
which is a shame.
We went to an open mic. I don't know if Zach was there. I don't want to out you as a person who still. This was years ago, but I do think the funniest person I saw in the room was a guy who was living in a van under a bridge, and it was beautiful. He was so funny, and I was like, "Well, that's too bad," because I felt
Did he
like
make
he was
it?
no. I mean, no. I mean, this
No.
was 6 years ago, and I'm sure he quit comedy, and that's for the best. And I bet he's a millionaire now because he probably like hustled and didn't have to pay rent for a while. But I just think about it where I'm like, oh yeah, you sort of do have to have, like, maybe if you had 3 roommates, you sort of need some kind of leg up, or at least like a job that lets you like, I knew so many people who just stole time from work, whether they were writers or comedians, and you got a
which is actually
cushy desk job.
Which is what I actually recommend to people.
Yes.
I'm like, having a job will release the pressure of this career.
Yeah.
People try too hard to get out of having a job. And in the early days, I think, have a job. And it's also a great source of material. It'll release the pressure. And then you can sort of leisurely go about trying to become a comedian, as opposed to, what a lot of people do, which is they feel like having a day job is some kind of a failure.
Yeah, and this is what I'm trying to say, is that really rich people own big companies. They're not paying attention. Get that job and steal their money by writing tweets while you're at your job that's managed by a hedge fund. Now, I have a really specific thought that I wanted to share with you, because I've read this book by Bill Bryson called At Home, which is all about the history of living in a home. So it goes from the pantry and the kitchen, and when did indoor plumbing start, and when did and Bill Bryson is this jovial man who brings a lot of he seems really enamored with all the things he's writing about. But a lot of that book, which is just about early humans living in towns, living in houses alone, all the way up to now, a lot of it is about how rich culture trickles down. And specifically that everybody eats dinner, which is the wrong thing that you should do to your body. That's why that guy fasts from 4:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m.
Yep. Is
that you're not supposed to take your calories to bed, but everybody does it. Everybody eats at like 7 or 8 p.m. because it's cultural. And I feel like a lot of cultural stuff that we now just do and claim as middle class, maybe you could call it bourgeois, but for a lot of people it's like, I think poor people still eat dinner together. You're living paycheck to paycheck, but like where I grew up, at least, everyone's still eating dinner, and it's all a part of just a rich king saying, I want a long table of stuff to eat. And there were, various kinds of birds he was eating. I'm just summarizing a book for you in really weird
but the idea is
patches.
just that, like, the rich people were doing it, and so then that ended up trickling down to poor people.
Yes, and I think that trickle-down economics doesn't work, but trickle-down culture has always worked. And so it's like, even in that book, just to give you just a little sense, like, salt always exists for humans. Like, humans crave salt because we're mammals. They always had it. Whether you're living in a beach town, they were like getting it from the ocean. They were getting sea salt like immediately. But pepper is this weird thing that used to be a luxury good. It used to be a social, like, people would have basements full of peppercorns, and they'd like throw them at, they'd make it hail. They'd throw it at people instead of making it rain. We get it. They were throwing it at people because they were like, look at this. Look at how much pepper I have in my basement. I'm so cool and so rich. And now it's like, I don't even think about it. You got salt and you got pepper.
Right.
So I just wondered if there's, I mean, I guess you can't just like pluck out, oh, this is something I do that's, that used to be a rich person's thing.
Well, I think we look at, like, it's so interesting because you look at, like, flat screen TVs. I think there was like a time that I remember where it was like, it would be crazy to own one of those. They're so expensive. You know what I mean? And then the demand increased, the supply went nuts, and then the prices go down. And after a time, and now it's like, if you don't have one, it's just silly. Like everyone should have a flat screen. Nobody has a bulbous TV anymore.
That's what's fun about watching old movies. I watched the movie The Firm. You remember this film? Gene Triplehorn?
Pretty erotic.
And oh my God, really good stuff. But they are showing that he's getting paid by the firm, like overpaid. And they're moving into this house, and they bring in this beautiful white couch, and I was like, oh my God, look at that couch. Oh, this is so nice. It's like playing The Sims. I love this. Oh yeah, just put that over there. And then they wheeled in like a big TV, but it was a tube TV, and I was like, wait, are they poor? Are they poor? What's happening here?
Right.
Exactly.
And I think probably any technology, like the microwave, all that stuff started with the radios, you know what I mean? All that like started with rich people having them, and then, and then it just became ubiquitous to the point where we're like, oh, why would you not? Especially in America, where we really figured out how to democratize a certain standard of living. Not to say that we democratize like a feeling of comfort in that living, but just that like if you're a poor person still has a microwave, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like we've democratized a lot of like the things that we have, but we haven't democratized like healthcare expenses, so it's like, it's weird. We decided that like having a microwave is everyone's right for sure, whatever, but not going to the hospital, anyways, we like put our emphasis on the wrong things.
Well, it's almost like, I don't know if it's control or whatever, but it's almost like, look, you've got it good. You have a TV that's flat. So who needs healthcare? It's kind of like how it passes down.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think that has lulled us, I think, into a state of like acceptance about things. Cause it's like, well, yeah, I can't get this liver transplant, but I can watch, I can binge on a really lovely television.
I got all the streamers.
And so it gets you. Right, so then it makes you feel, because the other interesting thing about wealth is that, I read this recently. I read a piece in The Atlantic called The Comfort Class, which I highly recommend to everybody, but basically the premise of it is essentially that like the people who are now in charge of policy, by and large, have never experienced financial insecurity. They might not even be wealthy, but if they get $1,000 medical bill that was unexpected, it is not going to make them bankrupt. But when you are legitimately poor, $1,000 bill like that metastasizes to utter downturn, And so that one of the things they talked about in this piece was that when you're like, the studies have shown wealthy people never think of themselves as wealthy people, which is also part of the problem, right? So like I don't have the numbers at hand, but it's, some ridiculous percentage of people who earn over $500,000 a year will just be like, well, I'm not wealthy. Right. I mean, the other people are wealthy. So those people who are probably millionaires look at like 100 millionaires and billionaires. It's like, well, those are the wealthy ones. I'm not wealthy. And then people in the middle class don't want to think of themselves as, and lower middle class and lower class don't want to think of themselves as poor. So everyone sort of gathers around this, vague area of middle where they won't think of themselves as rich, but they won't think of themselves as poor. So we just, our sense of class division and like whether or not we're willing to admit things about our own class status is all messed up. And then I think it's also interesting to say that like, oh, if you are, if you're a wealthy person and you're in charge of policy making, you don't know what it's like to receive a child tax, a check for having a child, which is what we had during Biden for a short period, which raised a bunch of kids out of poverty. They then discontinued that because of Congress and blah, blah, blah. But like the people who discontinued that do not know what it's like to receive that check and how meaningful it is, right? So they don't have the kind of insecurity that makes those policies, be meaningful to them. And I think that's something, that we're living with.
So
sorry, I didn't mean to get serious,
No,
but
perfect.
anyway.
This is a perfect transition to my final question, which is,
Well,
what is your net worth?
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
We can go around the room. I have a pet peeve because I've always, I'm a white guy with blonde hair. Obviously, I have plenty of advantages. But I grew up in the South. We didn't have no money. So I always get the way that people move middle class to be whatever they're in, where it's like, well, we have 2 luxury cars and a 3-bedroom house and all stuff, but we're upper middle class. We're not, we're not rich or
We're
anything.
not upper class. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It always would just annoy me.
Well, what do you think?
And it's apparently everybody does that. It's and it is annoying.
And what do you think the solution is? Do you think we should forcibly take Nancy Pelosi's stocks and just have her be scared for like a couple weeks? Or like, do you think everyone needs to be open and out about... I know we were mostly talking about the fascination with like rich people trying to act poor, but now that we're on the subject of like what would actually make our lives a little more equitable, is it just taxing everybody out of...
It's weird. So beyond like macro policy things that like, fun fact to listeners, I have a master's in public policy and I was a policy advisor for the city of New York, which is why I get nerdy about these things. So, but beyond that, one of the things I love about Maria Bamford, besides kind of everything, the comedian Maria Bamford will tell you at any point how much money she's making for a gig.
Yes.
Her solution to the micro solution she has developed to all of this is that we need to be more transparent about money.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating to me. I mean, I'm scared, but I have some friends who will just say numbers and I just start feeling like I'm going to get hives. Like I can't believe someone's sharing numbers with me. Mm-hmm. But it makes sense. What is and this is, especially true for women because we'll regularly get lowballed. I found out if I was transparent, my first job out of college, my second job I was a forensic consultant for a major accounting firm. And it was one of those jobs I was supposed to pay really well coming out of college, blah, blah, blah. And I was so excited to earn some money. And it was like funny because then I went from earning money to then spending years not earning money because I was like, no, but now I'm a comedian. So fuck me. But I made money for like 2 years at this job. And I just didn't negotiate my salary. I was like, oh, is that the offer? That sounds great. I'll see you guys on Monday. You know what I mean? I didn't say anything. And it turns out that my opening offer was $5,000 less than all of the men I came in with. I came in with only men. So they picked me, the girl. They were like, she'll get an opening offer that's $5,000 less. These guys will start out at a higher rate.
Right.
For no fucking reason was there a difference. And I was like, didn't occur to me to ask anyone. It didn't occur. You know what I mean? I didn't know that transparency could help anything. I also didn't know about negotiation, whatever. There's so many problems. But like, so I think on a micro level, like what can we all be doing is I think we could just share some of this information.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I told Dan how much I got paid for a QED spot before we started recording. Yeah.
And then opened a conversation.
Yeah, I was happy to do it. I guess
I made the same thing, by the way. I made the same thing.
You did make the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, honestly, in the interim, I might just be checking out Instagram. But if somebody is looking to get obsessed or more interested in kind of the modern wealth world, would you have a recommendation?
Yes.
Of who to follow about the modern wealth world?
I just whatever you're looking at,
How
but
can
it
you
just
get
in my
obsessed?
head, I assume it's Instagram.
I would recommend that one article, The Comfort Class in the Atlantic.
Yeah.
So
if you can get past the
hilarious.
paywall.
Oh,
All right, thank you.
by the way, non-wealthy people know how to get past paywall.
Gift me the article.
Yeah. And then I would also, I'm reading Ezra Klein's new book,
Abundance?
called Abundance, which he wrote with someone else, and I'm blanking on his name, which is mean. But that book is also, I mean, there's like a lot of stuff in there about just money and how people and public policy and money and what do we want? I mean, I'm on the left. You could probably tell from a million miles away. But I think about money a lot, but I think about it as like a public good a lot. And like, how do we distribute it? And what do we want? What services and all that stuff? Like money is kind of running the whole show with our public sentiment, you know? And I would love for it to be a less of a part of my everyday life of like how I think about it and worry about it and think about retirement and worry about it and a 529 and my kid and you know. So I don't know. I mean, by the way, if there's any listeners out there, wealth managers who want to give me some tips, I'm always open.
Very
Absolutely.
nice.
So, where can we find you otherwise, besides obviously the nicest bars in town where you're buying $50 cocktails? Where can we find you? If people wanna listen?
We didn't even get into the phenomenon of mocktails that cost the same as cocktails.
Oh!
Anyway,
That is really aggravating.
I could have talked
Rough.
about that. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
rough.
I hate
But you can find me on Instagram at Negin Farsad. In fact, I'm the same name on all of the social medias, of which I probably am on all of them and I'm on all of them in a non-committal fashion. So like you'll see content and then maybe you won't for a minute and then you'll see some again. But I would love for you to follow me on all those things. But the big thing is I have a podcast called Fake the Nation, where I have on comedians like Dan and hopefully Zach in the future. And you know, and people like Margaret Cho and Samantha Bee. And then together we talk about all of the issues, in a fun and lighthearted way. And, you know, so follow me there. I have a column in the Progressive magazine called Hemming and Hawing, so you can read my attempt to bring comedy to politics there. But yeah, Fake the Nation I think is a good one.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you, Negin.
Thank you so much for having me. This was like a metaphorical snifter in a metaphorical mahogany room.
Thank you to Negin. Doing a great job, and check her out on her podcast and those media platforms. Dan, before we leave, I feel like you had something you wanted to say to the hobbyholers.
That's right. I just wanted everyone to know I'm reading a book called Who is Government? And I'm obsessed with the bureaucracy that is disappearing from America. And I felt like it sort of tied into our conversation here about public policy, etc. But I would highly recommend Michael Lewis's Who is Government? A bunch of other writers write about specific people in government who actually make your life better, and you just don't know about it. And much like toiling as an invisible comedian, you know, not realizing how many lives you touch with your art, it's actually way more important that a guy figured out how to make sure coal mines don't cave in. But comedy is also the best medicine.
What's
the other best medicine is not having a coal mine fall on you.
Well, what's the best way to fuel this country? You know, fossil fuels or laughter? I say.
That's right. That's right.
We're the real working class men and women of America, and that's why
I think that's what we learned from this conversation.
And that's why I'm running for Congress. Now, Dan, where can we find you?
I am at Dan Wilbur Comedy on Instagram, TikTok, etc. I'm also at Dan Wilbur on X and various other platforms. You can find us every week at Young Ethel's at 7:30 on Wednesday. It's a great show. It's free, and it's called We Have Fun. And you can see me and Zach at the same time.
And it's in Brooklyn.
It's also in Brooklyn.
Not in fucking Des Moines.
Now
with
there's a
your-
Cleveland. There is a Brooklyn in Cleveland, so people might get confused.
It is wild how, I mean, they were just naming stuff, right? They just didn't know. They were like, there's one of those over there. We'll have one over, Paris, Texas.
Who
yada,
knows how long Brooklyn, New York is going to be around? I mean, it's probably going to sink into the sea, and then they named it Brooklyn, Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
So
Brooklyn, well, okay, that's a whole nother conversation. Well, maybe we'll find out about that next week, but you can find me at also Zach Sims on Instagram and Zach Sims Comedy on TikTok. I believe also on Blue Sky, maybe. I've got one Blue Sky. My one Blue Sky post is that I just wanted to let people know that I knew that guy who was supposed to be Dave Van Ronk in A Complete Unknown was Dave Van Ronk. And it does have one like, which is pretty good considering I'm not following anyone.
That's what makes that movie good, is that he doesn't walk in and go, "Hello, I'm Dave Von Ronk."
And also just Joan Baez. Wah, wah, wee, wah.
Right.
Well, until next
started.
week, see ya, hobby holers.